Ayrton Senna is widely regarded as the best driver in the history of auto racing. Michael Schumacher was the one to finally surpass Senna's records after they had stood for a considerable amount of time. However, would he have had a successful career if he had competed in this generation of Formula One racing? Would he have even won an F1 race? Let's find out. In the course of the sport's 71-year history, a significant number of drivers have entered and exited the scene during the course of those decades. Nevertheless, only a select few of those drivers have gone on to win the World Championship. Names like Ascari, Fangio, Clark, Prost, Hill, Senna, Schumacher, Vettel, and Hamilton. These individuals have at least one world title to their names, ensuring that their places in history will never be forgotten. However, for some people, particular names are associated with stronger feelings than others. Ayrton Senna, who was only 34 years old when he died during the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, is the driver who is often mentioned when people talk about the best drivers of all time. Senna often finishes in first place in polls that question who the best driver of all time was, and he is ranked first on the lists compiled by a large number of fans, drivers, and analysts. Fans still talk about the best drives he ever had. DVDs and documentaries are constantly being produced, and merchandise bearing his name and image is still selling massively all over the world. Senna has become the hero of the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Daniel Ricciardo, and even now, drivers idolize him. The legacy that Senna left to the world and Formula One may go unrivaled forever. During that terrible weekend at Imola in 1994, the tremendous three-time Formula One world champion who won the title in 88, 90, and 91 passed away. But even now, some 28 years after he passed away, Senna is still revered as a legend in the sport of auto racing by a great many drivers, whether they are rising stars or already well-known names. There was something so unique and extraordinary about Senna that it could not be duplicated by anyone else. You're enjoying this video, right? You definitely don't want to miss out on other amazing videos. So all you have to do is hit the subscription button. It's that easy. Thanks for doing that. Let's move on. When people think of Senna, the first thing that comes to mind is simply the tremendous speed that the Brazilian possessed. Yes, of course he was quick. He was practically the qualifying king throughout his career. He was able to produce laps that his competitors could only dream about. That incredible lap in Monaco in 1988, which earned him pole position and put him 1.5 seconds ahead of his McLaren teammate Alain Prost in the qualifying race, has got to be the most memorable moment of all of this. It is almost unheard of now for two drivers to finish with such a significant margin in dry conditions and under identical racing conditions. Because of Senna's incredible raw speed, he would frequently start vehicles on the front row of the race. At Lotus, Senna took 8 poles with the team in 1985 alone, and 8 again in 1986. Although Lotus cars produced during those 2 years were quite good, still they were not on par with the McLarens or Williams that Senna was competing against. When Senna eventually got into the McLaren, he was able to rack up pole position after pole position, usually having the measure of Prost in qualifying, and again when he was teammates with Gerhard Berger. Senna's skill in wet conditions is another thing most people remember about Senna. He was unbeatable when the track was slick. Many people have the misconception that Senna cherished the rain, but the reality is that he abhorred it. But despite the fact that Senna hated these conditions, he had put in a lot of effort to ensure that in the event that it rained, he would be faster than everyone else out there, and there were a lot of races that demonstrated this skill. For instance, in the 1984 Monaco Grand Prix, he was driving in a subpar Toleman, but still managed to work his way up to second place and was closing in on race leader Prost when the red flag was shown. Senna took his first ever Grand Prix victory in Estoril in 1985. Despite the conditions being so terrible, he raced brilliantly to achieve this victory. Then, the most memorable of them is Donington, 1993, when Senna turned in the lap of his life to move from outside the top 4 to take the lead in only 1 lap, and ultimately went on to win what was an amazing race. Navigating a Grand Prix car through the rain is not an easy task. However, Senna made it appear as though they were no more difficult than tying a shoelace. It's possible that Ayrton Senna's distinctively aggressive driving style, which he used to win 3 world championships, won't be as successful in the contemporary era. From beginning of the turbo era and throughout his time competing in Formula One, Senna was forced to become accustomed to ever-evolving car designs due to regulations and technological advancements. The shift from ground effect driver aid turbos to paddle shift gears is a significant one to get used to, and each of these cars demanded quite distinct driving techniques. Senna was known to be a very aggressive driver, and he demonstrated that approach consistently throughout the race. The fact that various cars demanded different driving techniques. He would take a late brake as he neared a corner, and then once he was there, he would apply a technique that we call high-frequency throttle stabs. The Brazilian driver would repeatedly step on and off the gas pedal while he was in the middle of a turn, and after he emerged from the bend, he would have a fantastic release. Let's take a look at the various ways in which newer generations of automobiles differ from older models. Classic automobiles from the 1980s and 90s were characterized by their straightforward construction and heavy reliance on engine power rather than linear suspension or aerodynamic design. There was no concern among the drivers over the traction provided by their tires. Senna was just using this strange throttle technique to keep the boost pressure up, so that when he got on the throttle properly coming out of the corner, his turbo produced more boost than the competitors. This was a very clever move on Senna's part, and it must have been incredibly difficult to pull off. However, the 2014 to 21 turbo hybrids, which are technologically advanced and more powerful cars, have aerodynamics, chassis, and suspensions, all working together to aid boost the speed of the car on the track, with tire grips being one of the largest and most important crucial aspects. During the Senna era, the emphasis was placed on the car's powertrain. The drivers did not lose seconds due to the wear and tear on the tires as they do at this point. Tire degradation caused by repeated laps can result in a loss of milliseconds, which can cause a change in the order of finish. Tires are a significantly more significant component of the sport, and the tuning of the vehicles is centered on the dependability of the tires. If today's drivers tried to late brake on the corner as Senna did, they would crash into the barriers since the car's program does not provide any feedback to the steering wheel, and the tires would not even live any longer than 3 laps. Have you wondered why Ayrton Senna's aggressive driving style is not emulated by other drivers today? Back in the 1990s and 2000s, spectators were able to observe distinct variations in the drivers' approaches to the race. However, in 2021, all Formula One drivers drive very similarly despite setting up new track records. Because of the well-tuned-up cars and the restrictions that have made them all the same, every single driver has adapted the same style in terms of how they steer, how they brake, and how quickly they accelerate. Through research and invention, car manufacturers have been able to produce vehicles that are stable for the passage of air and have a weight load that is very evenly distributed among the tires. It is now more important for cars to have a good grip than for the engines to have a lot of power, so drivers are concentrating on getting the most out of their tires. Second, drivers have been able to choose the quickest route to take thanks to the data and simulations that have been used. Before any race, drivers will practice races in their factories using accurate data from the circuits they will be competing on. Following the completion of a practice lap or a qualifying lap, the drivers are provided with a wealth of information regarding their driving behavior in both straightaways and turns. This information enables drivers to recognize and improve upon their weaknesses. During the Senna era, this was impossible. Therefore, the drivers had to rely on their instincts to navigate the track's curves. Because it was challenging to figure out how to drive the car in the quickest way possible, some drivers pushed the pedal to the floor while others drove with extreme caution. Although the aggressive driving style reminiscent of Ayrton Senna would seem distinctive and appealing to the spectators, it would not only have an effect on the car's reliability, but would also make the driver a few seconds slower. What's your thought about Ayrton Senna's style of racing? Let me know in the comments section below. That will be all for today's video. Thanks for staying tuned. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and notification bell so that you can always get to watch more amazing videos like this. See you in the next video.